down the bottom, there's a rail around underneath. That's a pneumatic bump rail. There have been an instance where the stand has actually come back down and the work has been underneath it and they've been crushed. So this is now a bump rail that's been put on those so that as soon as that is activated, the stand automatically stops. There's also safety harness points on them, which are designed up to the current standards. And we can put any hygiene wear on there. You'll see that one's got apron wash on it, but we can also do knife sterilisers, brisket chopper sterilisers, and saw sterilisers as well. The next one, in heading out into the carton area, we do stillage loading. So this is once again is to minimise carton handling, to stop people having to lift 27 kg cartons. So this one is the loader. So basically the cartons are coming along on that conveyor belt. They get pushed into the stillage rack. That conveyor goes up and down depending on where your stillage is set up. This is all pre-programmed to suit. And we load the stillages by using this machine here. And then obviously vice versa, there's an unloading ramp system as well. And we've put a number of these into Australia. There's probably more in Australia than there is here in New Zealand. You can probably see on those ones, they're from MC Herds. So that one there does the same situation. The conveyor goes up and down along the back here. Yeah, that conveyor there at the back, that goes up and down depending on where it needs to load out, and it pushes the boxes out onto that conveyor, and then it brings it back down to lead it out. Carton carousel systems. We do various carousel systems, whether they be for raw product, bagged product, or in this case, cartons. So this one here, they wanted a system where the cartons could actually go back around if they were missed. So for loading onto the pallets. A lot of these machines that you'll see, there is other further technology that's available, as we all know, for loading of cartons onto pallets, using robotic technology. And we do partner with other companies to do the next stage of this, which is the robotic palletizing. So a lot of the things that we've developed and do are things that are little niche items that are not being done by other people or other parts of the industry. Bandsaw outfeed conveyor. We've all got the bandsaws, but a lot of them they're just the saw itself with the tabletop. In this case here, we've set them up with a takeaway conveyor on the back. Also, we can do them with the heated jacket or electric elements, and we're converting a few at the moment to electric elements. Hygiene wear. We're actually sending a few of these into Australia right at the moment. We've got one particular plant that was still using the old overflow sterilisers, so they were using heaps of hot water. So we've now convinced them to go to the spray hand wash sterilisers. So obviously the solenoid valve is right up near the top of the unit, and when it operates, you're getting the right temperature water directly at the source. So we do them for hand washes, for knife sterilisers, and for tools as well. So there's various formats of that that can be designed and installed in plants. Other hygiene wear that we do: rotary boot washers, apron washers, other hand wash sterilisers. The rotary boot washers, these can be set up as manual or as automatic as you want. We have them set up as automatic control, so that as soon as somebody walks past them, they actually turn on. So make them signify that they actually have to wash their boots. And you can have them also set up with automatic dosing systems. This one's got a manual dosing system on it at the moment, but we can set it up with a automatic dosing system for dosing the chemical into the actual boot wash itself. That's basically all I wanted to talk about today. Basically, just outlining here who we are, where we are. So there's Warren as our managing director, and sales is myself, who gets involved in the project and management and sales. And then there's Andrew, our design manager, and Marco is our project manager. And if you've got, thank you, and any questions, and some nice Silver Fern Farms steak for the barbecue. Thank you. Righty, have we got any questions, Barry?
Anything up on our Mentimeter there? Not yet.
Thinking about it.
Thinking about it. I've got one for you. How do you find working with the research institutes and those that take products out to market? What we do more of or less of?
To be honest, they've been very helpful. Probably one thing I should point out as well is that we are working with ag research at the moment, and MIA and also AMPC all on the one project. Can't say anything about it, what it is at the moment, but they've been very, very helpful, and as to assist and provide backup, and also as a co-funder. MIA approached us with this opportunity, and then we can see the benefits of it as well, and we're quite keen to actually progress through that. Yeah. I'd say that AMPC and MLA have an advantage over the New Zealand funders.
Hey, awesome presentation. Looks like you make some pretty interesting kit there. My question was, so you started off in New Zealand and Christchurch, went into Australia. Have you looked to go further afield into, like the likes of America with JBS or Cargill or anything like that?
Yeah.
And how was that progression getting from New Zealand into the Australian market?
Yeah. Well, we are actually working with JBS in Australia on some of these machines. So there is a possibility of advancing further afield. And the machine that we're looking to develop with currently with AMPC and Ag Research, we can see that as having worldwide significance. So there is certainly that potential. But at this stage, we're pretty much focused on New Zealand and Australia.
There's a question up there. Excellent insights into Fern's developments. How many of these technologies can?
It's hard to say. It's a possibility, but nobody's doing it as yet. So, while nobody's doing it, we'll be doing it with these more manual machines.
Any other, Wena?
I think there is kind of there's no one solution fits all. So I feel like there'll still be value in continuing where you are as well. So that's exciting. Yeah. My question actually, because I noticed your version of a sterilizer, I did mention another sterilizer that we've been working with. Curious, in New Zealand, have you had issues with getting, I guess, approvals for sanitation and in terms of food safety? Have you had any issues with that, and have processes backed away from that?
No, not we haven't. Not that I've noticed.
Right, we might be paving the way in Australia for you, because we had traditional issues, and we've just done some pre-work with processes on that. So yeah, excellent. Thanks.
Yep, Barry, just off the back of that previous question, are there technologies outside of New Zealand and Australia that we should be, or are you using to advance your designs and technologies to bring to our plants?
There's some of the X-ray technology. Obviously, there was other companies that are using that, but X-ray and vision technology is probably two of the main ones that we really need to sort of focus on. Vision technology I can see as being very important for selection of product on conveyor belts, being able to distinguish product. And at this stage, there's a lot of people have been playing around with it, but it hasn't actually really, taken off. It hasn't actually been fully recognised. So I still see this potential in that area.
Right, staff.
Thank you for your talk. Is that tunnel bone, is that only for the hind legs, or do you have one that does the forequarter?
No, it's the hind leg only.
Only hind leg. Okay.
Yes, tunnel boning, for the tunnel boning.
Thanks very much, Barry.
Okay.
You're going to be around for the rest of the day.
Yes. So if anybody wants to catch hold of me and talk about any of those machines or get more information, come and see me.
Right. Thanks very much, Barry. That was great. Alrighty. Now I'd like to introduce to you Jeff Holmes from LASRA, which is the Leather and Shoe Research Association here in Palmerston North. And Jeff has over 35 years involvement in leather research, innovation and industry leadership. As a director of LASRA, he drives achievements in the leather technology, sustainability and material performance, supporting strong industry engagement. So he's done a lot of different things and he's here to talk to us today about innovation for growth. So Jeff, welcome you to the stage.
Don't get ChatGPT to write your thing bio, but anyway. Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity. Thanks for Kayleen for inviting me, and got one of my colleagues here as well. Leather and Shoe Research, we're down the road. If you take the walking bridge over the river, you'll find us as the first building that you come to. We've been in Palmerston North since the 1970s, I believe. 14 staff, leather. There's no leather research in the rest of this part of the world. There used to be a department in Cairo that did it, but they've closed, so we're it. And shoe, we might be interested in shoe. That's all. Obviously, there was a good shoe industry in New Zealand in the past, but that's also in demise. And so most of the stuff we do on shoe is safety footwear testing for the big Australian manufacturers, and we do quite a lot of that. So if you're interested to come and have a look, you're more than very welcome. Is there a, oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so just to give you a bit of context, I'm sure you're more than aware, hides and skins are a component of the fifth quarter, which really literally is a fifth quarter these days. You've got a 9.9 billion value for the industry, and about 1.9 something billion of that is the fifth quarter. Hides, skins, blood, casing, you know the drill. Obviously, by utilizing these otherwise waste products, it creates a bit of sustainable story. So it's useful to find application for as much as we can rather than put it in the waste. That's the fifth quarter. You can see number one up there is edible offals. Then we've got casings, blood products, which has come up a bit, and hides and skins, which have gone down. The total for hides and skins in the MIA's annual report is 260 million a year. So it's still a valuable component. We, in our work, we do a bit of analysis as well. It's just actually about 254. Utilizing that helps make the most of the animal. So why not find uses for it? And if we can get a good price for it, even better. There is an issue with this, and that's here. You can see on this map that the hides and skins that are sold worldwide from New Zealand have a heavy reliance on China, as most industries do, and Italy in Europe. So there's a breakdown of what you've got there. Different products all got different color codes, and the size of the disc refers to the size of the market. Small market in Australia, Indonesia, Vietnam, mostly for finished leathers, and that's going into these safety boots that I mentioned. Oh, I just see Steve. Hi. And then you've got obviously these main markets in China for salted bovine product, and into Italy it's for wet blue, which is part processed hides and skins that have had their hair removed, and a tiny amount for salted. So about 5/8 of the product into China is salted, and about 3/4 is wet blue into Italy, and very little thin pickings everywhere else. This is another idea of the same thing. You can see 37% of the total production is salted, so essentially just salted down, stacked and shipped. So very little operation. Then the wet bluing is about 28%, and then further processed bovine, which is mainly Tasman tanning, is 16%. We've got then the smaller options, which are the ovine. Ovine entirety is less than a quarter of the total. And you can see on the left-hand side that salted ovine, pickled ovine, and other ovine contributes 40-odd million to it. Many years ago, that would have been significantly higher. And this does create a big issue. What are we going to do with these skins? We can sell them, but at a very low price. The hides still have a reasonable return. The bottom green one there, that's really deer skins. I don't think goat skins are being sold, so it's a tiny fraction of what that used to be. So it's a bit of a declining industry. It's a bit of a sad story. Number of hides going into China. You can see over time, this is from the scale at the bottom is very hard to see, but it's from 2015 all the way up to 2024. And you can see that the number of hides that China is taking is fairly steady. There's COVID time you've got to think about, which is the dark blue, but generally fairly steady on the salted stuff. But on the wet blue, they've declined significantly. They took a fire sale on it in 2021 when post-COVID or during COVID. And that's because the price was way down. So you can see that the price of product has been declining steadily over that time. With the salted bull going to China at one point being $100, and now it's down to about 60 or 55. And they don't take wet blue, so it doesn't really matter. Hides to Italy, you can see basically it's all wet blue. New Zealand hides are of a high quality. They're grass-fed and everything else that we know, and they come out and they grade very well. So the Italians love them for their quality, but they also have been paying less and less. Oh, sorry, they've been paying less and less. There we go. And, it's a sort of a story the entire industry has been facing. So, what are the issues? Really, it's environmental perception, I would imagine, of the industry. There's a heavy competition from synthetics out there. There's a number of materials that describe themselves as something or other leather. Well, none of them are leather, but they're all declaring that they have some kind of leather, I don't know, history, vegan leather, mushroom leather, whatever they call themselves. It's nonsense. They don't have the quality of leather. They don't have the longevity of it. So this is all, all done in social media, nothing to do with reality. But that is reality, of course, these days. And the problem for leather as well is that it's expensive relative to synthetic products. So in the fast fashion market, it's quite hard to sell a product that costs several times more than a synthetic product that looks similar. Car seating is another area where it's interesting with leather. In the Asian market, they don't really like the odor of leather. They don't like the odor of anything. You want it a nice neutral odor. And so you get all the electric cars being fitted with this sort of synthetic leather stuff that makes you a bit sweaty. Big issues in the industry when it comes to the headwinds around European demands on environmental requirements, sustainability and the like. There's a PEFCR in Europe for apparel and footwear, and the industry's been working hard on trying to meet the requirements of that, but there are some issues with it because it doesn't really capture the value of a product which will last 10 years or more. They have like a cotton t-shirt will be worn 30 times. Well, fair enough, but you'll wear your shoes more than 30 times. So at Cotans, which is a group in Europe, and IULTCS, which we're members of, are kind of lobbying to get the durability included in that. There's this European digital passport, product passport, of course, which is coming in 2028, part of the European Green Deal. And it's got much to do with the transparency around the sourcing and life cycle impacts. And another part of that is also this EUDR, which I know you'll probably be more aware of than I, but this has been quite tough. Obviously, we've got a year's grace, but for the industry that really doesn't actually drive deforestation, it's quite a challenge. And I think it's something that we're trying to lobby our way out of, and I think MIA in part have been supporting that. There's another thing called the Higg Index. This is very biased towards synthetic materials. It was lobbied heavily by the leather industry to take appreciation, especially by Leather Naturally and a few others, appreciation of what leather actually did have as an impact on this global warming, eutrophication, etc. And they have downgraded the value now to around 60% or so of what it was. And that's significant because leather was around 160 on this scale, and now it's come back down to about the same level as many of these synthetic materials. So we can stick one of those on our leather seating maybe in the future. This is a report done by LWG that looked at about 20 LCAs that were carried out in tanneries around the world. You can see the geolocation of those units, and some of them were tanneries and some of them were processors and whatever. So they got a group of these companies together, did these analyses with a company called Spin 360, and they came up with a number, there we are, that number there, 22.48 kilograms CO2 equivalent for 1 meter squared of leather, meter squared, 10 square feet in my world. But so that's what they evaluated, all these productions at different parts of the world. And then this is some work that was done here. So looking at, and this was with a company just up the road, and they've, it was a very interesting project because as part of it, they had to install various equipment to ensure that the measurements could be taken accurately. And we came out with a number at the end of that of 8.54, which is really quite a bit lower than the numbers you saw in that previous report. And Bridge of Weir, which is the #1 in the world, they've got 8. So I think there is a bit of a difference in the way that that was done. The methodology was ever so slightly different. We were a bit earlier, I think, in our work than them. So there's a bit of that, but still looking very good for New Zealand. I just want to talk a bit about some of the work that we're doing in terms of trying to promote sustainable processing. So we're looking at biodegradable leathers, so we have been as part of a project, and some of those are commercials. All the ones that have got named colors, they're all commercial leathers. You'd see down the bottom, wet blue, this is just how fast it degrades in terms of hours. Collagen at the top, which degrades very rapidly. Untanned hide is the next one down, and then various leathers. So we're trying to get as close as we can to that untanned leather. The problem with that method is it uses oxytop, which is not very good methodology. And we've switched to this hot rotting approach, composting, which is actually for plastics, but works really well on leather. And we can break down chrome leather in 14 days. It's gone, it's disappeared, it's not visible anymore. If you put that into something like a worm farm and did some analysis, the worms don't like it. It is a bit toxic. Other materials we've tested, like veg tans, have come out a lot better. So it's all just part of gaining knowledge around the product and how it can end of life and such like. We're also involved in project work where we're looking to produce more benign processing methods, because the chemicals that are used in the industry are quite a high component of the problems that we get. So for sheepskins, there's a method of removing the wool using this a more eco-friendly enzyme approach, and it works pretty well. You get a bit of framing of the wool around the edges, but generally the skin quality is very good. No damage to the grain, so it can make leather. Obviously, the problem for that is what's the market? We've tried in the past promoting sheepskins into footwear, but the issue we've hit is that companies aren't too keen on the size. They want to have bigger animals to cut more cuttability. Another bit of work we're doing is this work looking at Wiltshires. So this is work we're doing with Massey University, and they've got a breeding up program going, and they encourage us to get involved and do some work with the skins. So this is Paul Kenyon, Professor Morris, Steve Morris, and Nicholas Schroers there. So we've been doing a bit of work with them and going through a Romney flock, which has been bred up to Wiltshire. And at 7/8 you can see looseness, which is a big problem for the quality of the skin because it's sort of very lightly structured, not low density, has completely disappeared. So Wiltshires are a great option for that reason. They make quite firm leather. They have higher strength, so that's all good. This is another project Massey are running, of course, Whenua Harmanu. They've got a dairy component to it and skins, for sheepskins, or sheep rather. And this is one of our scientists just marking up some animals on the way to slaughter, where we're evaluating regenerative versus, or rather mixed forage versus traditional. So far, 20% improvement in area and thickness. This one is a PAMU project, which is focused on trying to find a future sheep for New Zealand, I guess. Some of the issues around just shearing and crutching and all the other things bringing in extra costs, and you need gangs to do it, of course, and it's quite hard to get labourers to do that. How can you overcome that? You can go towards breeds like Damara, which are hair sheep breed, or Wiltshires, which are shedding breed, or Dorper, which again is a sort of hair sheep breed. We were really excited by the Damara. It was looking really, really good, but the project's moved a bit because of the better quality and yield of meat they're getting out of the Dorpers and Wiltshires. It does produce quite nice skins, very, very good quality. So we're just following along with this project and getting involved at the slaughter plant to collect the skins. Mentioned earlier about traceability, and this is a big story. It's been around a long time in our industry because farmers used to be paid on the quality of the skins, but I guess that's not happening anymore. But there is a big industry collaboration in Europe looking at the traceability techniques currently in use in New Zealand. There are Gibson Bass stampers being used, which are sequential stamper. Each hide gets an individual mark that can be tied back to the RFID tag. So you've got some correlation there. The other options are to use lasers to emboss the hide. The problem there, you get a bit of a problem with ablation. But really there are limited options really available. So the idea will be probably tie it in with blockchain and process that through. We've got our own bit of work going on where we're trying to embed some chemical traces during one stage of the processing, and then that will hopefully be carried through to the end of the production, and then use multispectral techniques to do something with that. I just noted earlier the different elements in the fifth quarter, and blood's doing very well. It's 100 mil up on what it was the last year. So what's happening? Obviously, it's the BSA, it's the stuff going on at ProLiant and all these other places. There is a big market for these nutraceuticals, medical treatments, biopharmaceuticals, you name it. So this is a huge area for us to focus on, of course, but not relevant to me. How do we get a bit more value out of hides and skins? Well, rather than sending it to landfill or sending it to China for $1, what can we do with it? We could turn it into collagen, of course, and everyone talks about collagen, and it's a big story. But you need scale and you need to have market. So those are the challenges that the industry is facing. we're doing quite a lot of work in this area. So, you know, what can you get from bovine protein? So you've got trimmings and various parts of the hide that aren't utilized. Could we turn them into something useful? We can turn them into collagen hydrolysates, and then the source of amino acids, and etc. And this is some work that was done with Ag Research on the value of bovine trimmings and wastes as a hydrolysate in pet food, and showed some pretty encouraging results. It's got high nutrient availability, didn't seem to have a problem for the gastrointestinal tract. Nina's the person to talk to about this. These are a few of the test animals doing their job. Archie here and he picked the one on the left because that one was the gelatin one, and then he went back to the one that was with the bark tanning material, but he ate them all. So sustainable biomaterials. So you know, this is another area potentially. This is, in one case here, we've been, rather than using a chemical approach, we're using a mechanical approach. And these materials may have value for energy applications and a few other options. So these are some of the materials that we've produced. Now, the sheet material on the left is a waste from the industry that would have gone to landfill and has been converted into this beautiful thin plastic sheet. And it has applications where you require high temperature sort of resistance or thermal stability. And so it's been used in, or possibly being used in batteries for separators. The one on the right is a kind of foam material that we've been making. And it's got squidginess to it, so it's quite an interesting, but it's same raw material. So there are applications for these waste streams that maybe in the future we can drive on a bit more. We've invested in this thing for the industry. Our industry members, yeah, I'm nearly there. Bioreactor, I mean, just standard stuff, but you know, very useful for scaling up. And just to quickly, here's some kind of biofoam that's 20% collagen hydrolysate. It's being produced by Muirhead, part of the Bridge of Weir group, and they're making this for aircraft seating. And then they actually make the leather that goes on the seat. So they make the cover and the cushioning, which is quite a clever thing. And last one, really, Mindhive, which is a New Zealand innovator, nothing to do with us really, but we've kind of done some work in this area too. Machine learning, that type of thing, to look at the grades of hides and skins and push it on. So to make a bit more idea about what the quality is like. So, you know, what's the future? We've got to reduce the carbon footprint. We've got to adopt regenerative practices, improve in transparency, carry on with the technical leaders who are working in tanning and grading, and increase the value of the product. So thanks a lot.
I'm going to hold questions because we're behind time a little, but you're going to be around, Jeff, so hit them up over lunchtime. Don't get them away without any questions. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is joining us by, there's going to be a video and then she's going to join online for Q&A. So I'd like to introduce Marie-Pierre Ellis-Uri, a professor of animal sciences from Bordeaux University in France. She's also an associate at INRAE, which is an equivalent type organisation to Ag Research, and herbivore research. And her work focuses on the improvement and prediction of ruminant meat quality. And she joined Ag Research in July last year to work on the RUMQUAL International Associated Laboratory, which aims to contribute sustainable meat production that meets satisfactory quality standards.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Marie-Pierre Eliès, and today I will speak about improving grazing livestock farming in France, how to respond to concerns about quality, sustainability, and societal expectations. First of all, I will speak about INRAE. INRAE is a targeted research institute which has a range of responsibilities, carries out a diversity of activities, and produces results with strong societal impact. We are particularly aware of agricultural science, plant and animal science, food science, but also environment ecology science. To achieve our objectives, INRAE is organized in a form of matrix with 18 research centers, as you can see here on the map. We are now in a context of global change in terms of climate change, biodiversity reduction, environmental degradation, pollution, depletion of fossil resources, malnutrition, and population growth. Our hypothesis is that the major challenges addressed to us in terms of agriculture, food, and environment require integrated approaches such as inter-transdisciplinary and multi-scale approaches. The major subjects that are important to consider are biodiversity and adaptive resource management, bioeconomy and complementary uses for biosources, sustainable and healthy food for all, but also changes in agricultural practices in response to climate change and reduced impact. To ensure that research findings translate into impactful actions, INRAE relies heavily on agriculture engineering schools, for example, Bordeaux Sciences Agro. This partnership fosters a dynamic exchange of knowledge where cutting-edge research meets education and training. By working together, INRAE and Bordeaux Sciences Agro from a complementary duo that strengthens the dissemination of scientific insight and equips future professionals with tools to drive sustainable transition. Concerning just Bordeaux Sciences Agro, it is a high school of agriculture which seeks to train competent and responsible agricultural engineers in all the area of agriculture and food industry. Bordeaux Sciences Agro wants to contribute to agroecological transition at the service of region and of the agri-food and forestry sector through the teaching, research, and innovation. Therefore, our strategy is to accelerate agroecological and food transition, to propose bioeconomy based on rational and circular use of resources, and to mobilize data science and digital technology to support transition. The evolution of the consumption of animal products over the last 20 years led us to expect that the decline will continue in the next year. However, the maintenance of herbivore farming on lands where crops are not possible is necessary, and that also most as the herbivore delivers some ecosystem services. Nevertheless, there is a need for an improvement of herbivore farming in order to meet sustainability and societal concerns such as animal welfare. It is also necessary for herbivore production to be resilient to climatic hazards, especially to their impact on the variability of forage supply. In that context, our researches aim to propose environment-friendly herbivore production, valuing forages and other non-competitive feed resources, societal concerns such as animal welfare and product qualities. Our research are made to better understand animal functioning and the impact of farming practices on animal and environment. Our main field of investigation is grassland-based system in semi-mountain areas with a generic value for similar soil and climate conditions. We have classified our scientific priorities in 4 different domains: efficiency of animal and system, products quality, adaptive capacities and robustness, and also environment impact and services. Our approaches are based on experiment on animal, use of database, modeling, and system experiment with also commercial funds. To design innovative, sustainable ecosystem, we explore agroecology, precision livestock farming, and also private-public partnership to foster innovation. I will now detail one example of another European project done in our lab, which is called the ENTACT project for innovative tools for assessment and authentication of chicken meat, beef, and dairy products quality. The ENTACT project allowed to address the following challenges. First, to develop comprehensive models quantifying the impact of husbandry system on quality traits related to safety, nutritional value, and sensory features. And also to involve all the actors of the chain, the cattle chain and the chicken chain production, but also the consumer, to develop quality assessment and authentication tool, and to provide science-based decision support to policymakers, to industry, to farmers, but also to consumers. Different breeding systems are studying in the project, from intensive to extensive ones. The breeding systems are linked to meat qualities in terms of sensory quality, nutritional value, and also safety, using the global concept of one quality. Thanks to this type of approach, which we are carrying out with private companies in the meat sector, we have succeeded in developing a European meat quality prediction system. This system is called 3G, and it is an adaptation of the Australian Meat Standards Australia model to the specificities of European farming system. Meat companies have begun to adopt this system for predicting and classifying meat according to quality. For example, we have contributed to the development of a branch called Or Rouge, which offers consumer guaranteed top quality meat, ensuring both consumer satisfaction and better remuneration for the breeders that are involved in this brand. You have here a presentation of this brand of Rouge, and if you want, you can have a short presentation with this video. Another project is called Watson and aims to develop a holistic framework with anti-counterfeit and intelligence-based technologies that will assist food chain stakeholders in rapidly identifying and preventing the spread of fraudulent practices across European transnational agri-food chains. This project is particularly linked with the International Associated Laboratory RUMQUAL for real-time assessment and modeling of meat quality from ruminants, which was signed in September 2023 between three partners, AgResearch, INRAE, and Bordeaux Sciences. The International Lab RUMQUAL aims to generate functional and applied knowledge on the assessment and modeling of meat quality from ruminants. Therefore, we are working on three different subjects: the real-time assessment of meat quality using RAMS and NIR-based technologies, the development of modeling approaches of meat quality using research data across disciplines, and the investigation of the mechanism of meat quality and flavor evolution during dry aging and cooking to produce high value of meat products. A common database of more than 400 cattle from different trials in France and New Zealand has been established. As there are different muscles, the analysis cover around 600 samples in total, and the data set includes animal characteristics, but also carcass performances, MSA score, sensory evaluation by expert and consumer, lipid and fatty acid content, muscle properties, NIR, and REMS measurements. Approximately 300 French samples are ready to be analyzed in New Zealand using NIR and REMS, and the rest of the analysis were already been done in France. Different models to predict pH and meat quality were established with this database using various research data. It allowed to prepare four short communication and 2 scientific papers. Various treatment combinations were also investigated in order to study the mechanism of meat eating quality and flavor evolution during dry aging and cooking to produce high-value meat products. Samples from each treatment were taken for physicochemical properties, structural analysis, flavor analysis, and heat toxicant formation. The analyses are ongoing and will allow to prepare 1 short communication and 1 scientific paper. Thank you very much for your listening.
Do we have Mary online? No. Okay. Jeff, I'm going to call you back up for Q&A. So we have some questions on Menti for you. Can you guys bring that up, please? Go.
All right.
So, is there adequate collaboration between meat and hides and skins, or other processes different?
I don't actually know. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the plant. A lot of the plants, obviously, companies processing the skins may be on the same site as the meat and the meat plant. So I guess there's some opportunity. They've got the same issues: COD, BOD.
Yeah.
Some of the chemicals are different. Obviously, we've got chrome. Chrome is a bit of an issue that's very specialized. So I guess the fact that more of the chemical processing is done on hides and skins, and it's more a kind of BOD, COD issue. It probably has some overlap, but maybe not as much. I mean, combining them together makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Headwinds in the wool sector. We get alternatives. Are there any opportunities for collaboration?
What do we mean by product types between wool and leather?
Pineapple.
Oh god. You got to be careful, haven't you? Got to be careful if you diversify into synthetic. I mean, yeah, collagen. I mean, when I tell my daughter that where collagen comes from, she's horrified. But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question. I mean, the wool sector does face headwinds, but you can convert wool into hydrolysates, keratin hydrolysates, and do things with it. So it's the same issues that we're facing, whether they, I don't know about synthetics collaborations, but yeah, maybe.
Okay, sustainable fashion. Do you see foreseeable growth in the sale of new leather products? Will it be influenced?
No, it's never hindered by second-hand availability. That's sort of different type of audience. But new product, I think it needs to be more. It's funny because leather is everywhere you look. It's just that we feel that it's not got much of a value. So, you know, it's fast fashion. I don't know. I feel that leather should be made cheaper, and maybe it would be a bit more competitive in that market. It's a challenge. But yeah, it's not going to be hindered by the availability of second-hand products, because the people who have them may have 25 pairs of shoes like my daughters. You know?
Righto, from the floor. Wayne.
Just one slightly off-topic question, but salt. What do you do with your? Do you have any exciting ways of recycling the salt that comes with the hides, or I know it's a bit of an issue that we end up with, and we were trying to come up with creative ways of what we could do with it. Any solutions there?
It's not really such a, dare say, it's not such an issue in NZ. Obviously in Australia would be a big problem, and I know in Toowoomba they've been doing lots of work there with the reverse osmosis and whatever. If you go to India and China, that's where the big problem is for leather with salt. So they bag the salt, they put it in little cellars underneath their tannery, and they can't use it. So I'm not sure if I can answer your question exactly, but I mean, there's nothing going on that we're doing, and maybe exporting it to West Australia and evaporating it. I don't know.
All right. Any further questions, Jeff, or we'll let him off the hook now?
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay. Is Marie-Pierre online at all, or is she? We missed her. So, any questions on the room qual stuff that you might have? I'm going to direct you to Carolina. So, if anyone's got any questions on that work, Carolina's the go-to. So please hit her up over the break. We need to keep moving on the program now because the next speaker, has, as was previously noted, has a lot of responsibilities today. He's not only going to be speaking to us now, he's also going to be cooking dinner. So we better give him a good round of applause for that. So Dr. Renyu Zhang is a senior scientist at Ag Research at Palmerston North, and he did his PhD at AUT in 2021, and a lot of us were part of that journey as well. We remember that. His research focuses on developing innovative meat-based foods using dual protein systems, leveraging dry aging techniques to create unique flavor profiles tailored to consumer preferences, and applying rapid omics techniques for meat quality assessment and authentication. Additionally, he explores consumer product interactions to drive the development of meat products from a consumer-centric perspective. Frank.
Right, kia ora everyone. I'm pleased to be here to share some of the insight on the competitive advantage of the venison based on our initial study. So I'm presenting on behalf of my colleague, Caroline Thong. She's probably currently on leave. She's probably sitting on the beach at the moment. But yeah, and so I pick up this task. So this project is co-funded by the Science Strategy Investment Fund of Ag Research and also Deer Industry New Zealand. So I'll try to keep this brief. I know I'm the only thing between you and the lunch, and that's a very dangerous place to be. So Deer Industry in New Zealand is well established and contributing to the velvet and the meat products. So the velvet is highly valued in the Asian market, especially those from the older stag and the over 3 years old. And so due to this reason, the number of the stags increasing over the years, especially the last 5 to 10 years. And but the meat from this kind of animal category is commonly undervalued and considered as a byproduct for the velvet industry. And it's because the meat cut from this animal category could be slightly too big or under its traditional market standards. So the questions are, how much do we know about the meat from this animal category, and what can we do to improve its value to compete with other meats? For example, like the standard venison product from much younger deer and typically under 3 years old, and also like a bison product, which is a strong competitor in the US market. So it sounds like $1 million question, but if we don't do anything, and the situation won't improve. So as an initial study, we aim to determine what's the nutritional profile and of the venison from these two age groups, and compare with the bison products. So we received two types of sample. One is the shoulder cuts, and the other one is the typical trims. So due to the small sample size, so what I decided to do, I cut into small pieces and mix them well and run through the mixer twice. So to ensure the consistency Then I prepared 5 patties from each sample and then running through the oven cooking and ground it again for the nutritional analysis. So here we measure the amino acid profile, fatty acid profile, and cholesterol, B vitamins, and some key minerals, and some health-related metabolites such as trimethylamine and oxide, also called TMAO, and its precursor like TMA and DMA, and analyzing this compound can provide some insight into how the diet can influence gut microbiota and the subsequent metabolite production. So the result from this study was compared with published data for the bison from the Food Data Central of the USDA. So from the result, there's no harmful metabolites like TMAO, TMA, or DMA was detected in any venison sample, which is good news. So indicating there's no potential health risks associated with this product. And when we're looking at the stag and the U3 samples, the stag means they has a higher choline and B10 compared to the U3 samples. And these two metabolites has been suggested to support like a brain, liver, and the heart functions. So when looking at other metabolites, there's some fluctuation between depending on the type of sample or the age groups, particularly for the creatinine and carnitine. And but we can see from the carnitine, the stag trim has a lower level of the carnitine compared to other venison samples. But when looking at the stag sample in general, and it has lower creatine and also gamma butyrate. The lower level of gamma butyrate is somehow is not a bad thing because it can be converted to the harmful metabolites like TMAO. So the lower level is actually beneficial. So when we're looking at the total amino acid, all the venison sample, it has a higher levels of amino acid compared to the bison, and indicating potential higher protein content in these samples. And also for when we're looking at the stag shoulder, when we compare to the stag trim, it has a higher levels of amino acid, which could be associated with a lower fat content. We will be showing later. And if we're looking at taurine specifically, this particular amino acid is a conditional essential amino acid, has been report to support the heart and the immune and brain health. So the levels of taurine is lower in the stag trim compared to the stag shoulder and also both of the U3 samples. So next, when we're looking at the fatty acid profile, and generally the stag trim has a high levels of fatty acid compared to all the other venison samples, also the bison, and indicating a higher fat content in these samples. And when looking at the major fatty acid group, so the bison product had a lower polyunsaturated fatty acid, but compared to all the venison sample, but it has higher monounsaturated fatty acid compared to the U3 venison samples. When comparing between the age groups, so the stag means it has also has a higher monounsaturated fatty acid, but also the saturated fatty acid and the lower levels of the polyunsaturated fatty acid when comparing to the U3 categories. Interestingly, although the stag means has a higher levels of the saturated fatty acid, its cholesterol level is lower compared to the U3 category. However, all the venison sample, when we compare to the bison, it has a higher level of cholesterol. So this may not be a really good thing if you want to highlight your cholesterol level. But when we're looking at the B vitamins, the good thing is the venison product is a richer source of the B vitamins, especially for the B1, B2, and the B6. But the bison had the higher levels of the vitamin B12. So it's kind of tightly compete with each other, but in the different categories. So when we're looking at the two among the two age groups, so the stag means has a higher vitamin B12, And if you're looking into the stack train particularly, it has a slightly lower of the B1 and the B2, but slightly higher in the B3. So it's a little bit hard to draw the conclusion which one is more beneficial. But if you're looking at the key elements, and again, the venison is a richer source of like a magnesium, phosphorus, and zinc. But the bison had a higher level of a trace element like selenium. So when we trying to compare between the age groups, so the stack mince has high levels of zinc, but also for the stack train, it still it has a slightly lower of a magnesium and the phosphorus. So I hope you guys are still with me. So to sum up, and when we compare to the bison mince, the venison product is a richer source of polyunsaturated fatty acid and amino acid content, also the B vitamins, especially for B1, B2, and B6, and those minerals like magnesium, phosphorus, and zinc. But the bison stands out for its lower cholesterol content and also higher vitamin B12 and selenium, and also the lower level of the saturated fatty acid when we compare to the stack mince. So when we're trying to compare between the age groups, so the stack mince is a better source of the monounsaturated fatty acid, some metabolized like choline, B10, also the minerals like zinc and vitamin B12. But it also has a lower level of the cholesterol and the gamma butyl-B10, which are the beneficial. And when we're having a look at the U3 mince, it's a better source of the polyunsaturated fatty acid and lower saturated fatty acid, and also have a lower fat content. And it also has a high levels of vitamin B1 and B2 when we compare to the stack train. So these two venison animal category for the venison sample, they offering kind of unique health benefits for different dietary requirements. So to further strengthen our current finding, we need to kind of ensure the data reliability. We need to validate our current data using higher number of animal replicates and also accounting for the on-farm factors. And also a comprehensive database, a nutritional database need to be established for the venison product for both of the animal categories. And this information is not only beneficial for the producer and farmers, and also for the researcher. It's also important to determine what's the consumer preference of the venison sample from these two age groups, and compare with the bison product, and to identify the key differentiators. So finally, to maximize the impact, strengthening the strategic collaboration with the DINs and the farmers is very important. So their support is crucial for the industry adoption and the practical application. So yeah, that's me. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any question, you can come and talk to me and or send us an email. Yeah, we want to kind of take this further. Thank you.
I've got a couple of minutes for questions. Thank you for that. And you? Who's got some questions?
Thanks. Was there any particular reason you chose bison as a comparison group?
Because that's a strong competitor in the US market, so they want to position themselves in a better way, in that market. Yeah.
What proportion of stags going to slaughter are in that over 3 age group, and what is the prediction for an increase in that?
Well, don't hold me on that. I don't have an exact number. I assume due to the velvet, the growing of the interest for the velvet, and the number of stags is growing, and assumably, we also hear from a lot of farmers who has a lot of deers or have older stags. They want to find a way to increase the value for their animals, not only the velvet, also want from the meat product. So yeah, I don't have an exact number, but it is increasing over the years. Yeah.
Yes, I had another question.
Yeah.
Did you notice, or have you looked at water holding?
Yes, well, we didn't determine directly, but we do measure the cook loss. There's no different. Yeah, the reason for measuring the cook loss is to ensure we don't have like a difference because of the water loss. So yeah, that's no different. Yeah.
Any other questions for in here? Nothing up on Minty. Alrighty, well, we are getting pretty close to that lunch time. Keep perfectly time, so please thank Renew
Yep,
for us.
thank you.
So that brings a wrap to our international and commercial R&D session. I just had a few things I wanted to say, a bit more housekeeping. Got a couple of sessions or talks being swapped around this afternoon due to some travel issues with Christchurch. So there'll be some swaps to the agenda that the chair, Emma, will have to navigate that one. He's in charge of the next session. We need to be back here at 1:30 p.m. sharp. And I'd also just like to again reiterate our thanks to the sponsors for making this workshop possible. So with that, thank you very much everyone for contributing to the first session of the workshop. Thank you again to our speakers. Enjoy the hour for lunch, make the most of it. Thank you.
sustainability session, who clearly I didn't grab a session to chair quick enough. That's all right. Like Cameron said, we got a little bit of readjustment of order in this session. Some of our speakers are still in Christchurch due to fog, so they'll come on the screen later on. But first up, we got Vincent Desunier Brazil. So Vincent is an agronomist turned life cycle assessment scientist, passionate about sustainability and agriculture. He measures how small innovations drive big gains in efficiency and environmental impact. And he loves the idea of using nutritional data to tell the full story of red meat's footprint, bringing together science and transparency and nuance in the conversation. His goal is to help the industry and consumers to make informed decisions that balance sustainability, productivity, and profitability. And he's going to talk to us about life cycle analysis and nutrition. Welcome up, Vincent.
Okay, so thank you for having me, and thank you for the delicious lunch. So, yeah, Vincent, I'm here to talk about nutrition and life cycle assessment. So it's two topics that need to be bridged, right? Because I'm going to start with an age-old question, right? How do we compare apples and oranges, right? So some people are going to say, oh, I prefer apples, they just taste better. But then oranges, it's much more easier to do juice at home, right? You don't need a very complicated machinery to transform, orange into juice, which are all interesting arguments. But I think the arguments that are getting pushed out here, or the ones that we are hearing about in the media, is usually, and it's not the only one, but carbon footprinting, right? So here we see an apple and an orange, and there's been a study from 2018. So here now 2018 is 7 years ago. So I do look young, but I feel old because this is when I started my PhD. That was one of the papers that was very appealing to me. So 2018, they calculated that an apple was about 60 grams of CO2 and one orange is 50. So you could say, oh, well, there you go. Oranges are better. So everybody should eat oranges and ditch the apples. So this carbon footprinting is calculated using a life cycle assessment, which is an ISO internationally standardized methodology to assess the environmental aspect and potential impacts associated with a product, system, or service. And so that's interesting for managers because they can see what's the hotspot in their process. So some people are going to know that in calves and red meat is the enteric fermentation, but in other processes, this sometimes helps into targeting what's the most important method or process to target for improvement. But also it's interesting for communicating how your green practices are important, but also carbon labeling, so helping your product stand out against its competitor. So that is LCA. What it looks like, on a farm or in a schematic representation, it's you start from resource extraction and refining. So that's your tractor, your seed, your feed, your fertilizer. Where does it come from? How is it produced? And how much do you need to bring on your farm? So this is all accessible now with all this data-driven technology that we have. So we're able to have this almost accounting methodology to account for all of these inputs. Once these inputs get on farm, then we are able to calculate how much carbon is sequestered in your soil, how much gas your tractor is consuming, and how much of all your agricultural practices are emitting or sequestrating carbon or others such as water. Every bucket of water you give to a cow, you count them, and at the end of the line, you're able to have a number. When we're looking at packaging and distributing, how much cleaning agents we're seeing, and interestingly, this morning, the presentation on recycling water, this is where these technologies can shine, right? When we're able to show, well, we decreased water usage by X amount, or how much plastic we're using to package or mince meat. Now, what's usually overlooked in LCA for food is the use phase. So here you see cooking and eating, right? Which is what, in my opinion, the most enjoyable part of food, is usually ignored in these LCA papers. So the one from 2018, interestingly, doesn't look at the use phase. It's so they call it a cradle to store gate, right? So they don't even look at what's happening in your kitchen. And then end of life, if you're looking at new composting strategies or other ways to go about recycling your waste, these are the steps you want to look at. So across all these steps, you're able to see, what's the energy use, carbon offset, or land use and energy use. So today I want to focus on this part, which, as I said, which is what has been under the most scrutiny in food production, right? So when I showed the carbon footprint of apples, they didn't look at what's happening after the store gate, which isn't a big deal for apples, but for other products such as red meat might be worth measuring, especially when you're looking at cooking. So in the nutritional LCA, so NLCA, we have to remember that nutrition, and that's the dictionary definition, is using food to support life. So we're not into the usual framework of LCA where they're comparing, let's say, hydroelectricity to coal-generated electricity, because electrical energy is the same product wherever it's come from. Whereas food, when we're comparing apples and oranges or peas and red meat, it's hard to find one metric to compare them on the same field. So NLCA is as soon as you start to normalize the carbon footprint to a nutritional metric. So here you see for 100 calories, how many kilograms of CO2, and that's again cradle to store gate. You see that apple and oranges and peas, you would say these are the best. I don't need red meat because carbon footprint is too high. I can get all my calories from apple, oranges, and peas. Now, if you look at another NLCA metric, so 100 gram of protein, that's assuming all proteins are equal, which I'll go into detail after. Then you see apples aren't as attractive anymore, because if you try to get all your protein from apples, you're going to bust their carbon budget. And you see how beef is superior to apples in that metric. But then I've been telling you that these are all numbers from cradle to store gate. There are recent analyses from Ag Research, but also in the United States, where they looked at what's happening after the store gate. So I don't know if you've ever eaten raw peas, but unless you're a bird, it's not really palatable and it's not very digestible, right? So you can't, so all the proteins in your peas, if you're not cooking them, you're not making anything with them. So that study showed that once you get the peas into your kitchen in the United States and you start cooking them, boiling for about 30 to 45 minutes of water to turn them into digestible form, well, actually the CO2 you're releasing from your electrical grid in your kitchen is, making a lot of carbon. And so that's comparing two studies, one from 2022 and one from 2023, comparing red meat and peas when you're taking the use phase into account. So these numbers, they've never been properly compared, right? They're in two separate articles. There's a lack of communication and discourse between these two numbers. Okay, so why do we need NLCA now? So and I don't remember who said it, but unfortunately now social media is the reality for some people. That was a quote from someone this morning. But so this is documentary that just came out. I didn't see it. I'm sure it's interesting, but it's about how, feeding the world without cows, which feels like there's a lot of traction in media about, how do we need them? Peas are so efficient. We don't need cows. So this is the discourse we're hearing. This is, and there's a lot of money going into all these alternative protein. There's a lot of money going into cultured meat. But in all these conversation or these monologues about, plant food or lab food, the nutritional potential of red meat is often overlooked. So the current LCA methodologies do not account for the bioavailability of key nutrients. The latest agronomic breeding and nutritional research, so this is, for example, the one on deer meat that we saw this morning, they don't take into account these information and the potential mitigation technologies such as low methane feed and breed and potentially vaccine. So when I'm talking about the nutritional potential of red meat, and I'm sure a lot of dietitians in the room are going to be yawning now, but for some people who aren't aware, peas do not have, is it? Oh yeah, it's working. Right, so peas here. So peas do not have the essential amino acid, which aren't produced by humans. So technically, even when you're using protein as a metric to compare red meat and peas, you're still missing a part of the story, which is that I think it's lysine or tyrosine. I'm able to take the blame on that error. But so one of the amino acid is lacking in peas, but is present in beef. So when you're really comparing the two, you should take these kinds of metric into account. So this should be the last bar graph that I'll be presenting. So this is a 2022 study about priority micronutrients. So these are the ones that are usually lacking in lower and middle income countries in women of reproductive age. So now they're using another degree of complexity, is who we are feeding. So there's the what are we feeding, red meat or peas, but who are we feeding? Because women of reproductive age do not have the same requirement as men above 60-year-old. So this is the mass, right, in grams needed to provide 1/3 of daily requirements for vitamin A, folate, vitamin B12, calcium, iron, and zinc for women of reproductive age. So you can see here liver, the number is 11. I know it because I read the study, but so basically if a woman eats 30 grams of liver, she would have all her micronutrient requirement met for the day, whereas she would need to eat about 1.8 kilograms of cooked peas, and then you can see the carbon footprint from that. But again, this is one food. Food is going to be taken in conjunction with other ingredients, which is what we need to take into account into the future studies. So what we are doing right at Ag Research at the moment is we're trying to get the whole story from pasture to fork, right? So including the use phase, including the energy needed for cooking, but also including a lot of these other metrics, nutritional metrics, and the latest improvement in farming. So the next generation of nutritional LCA will be based on the impacts associated with realistic farm management practice and mitigation. So the ones you are actually doing, not the ones from 2018 from a paper that took second source data and tried to estimate what you're doing. So we're trying to have this scenario-based approach. So okay, but my farm is doing it like this, and we're shipping to the store down the street. So we're having this realistic scenario with, for example, plant-based scenarios. So focusing on the nutritional bioavailability of key nutrients. So iron is more available when it's in ruminant meat versus when it's in some plant, because some plants have anti-nutritional factors which prevent the absorption of certain nutrients, and focusing on at-risk demographics and contrasting with alternative food or meal options. So that's looking at all these new cultured meat, plant-based meat, because they're usually high in other ingredients, so sodium, trans fat, what are the potential impacts on health, and all these types of metrics. So if you are interested in seeing how your operation or how your technology could help into getting that message out there, what is the real potential of red meat in nutrition, that I would be happy to talk about what we're looking at. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer your questions, and if you're shy, you can always come see me or send me an email, and Talia will be more than happy to answer your questions. So yeah, thanks.
So I was told we have to use the mic for up here as well. So we've got a couple of questions up there.
Not entirely whether it's completely on topic, but are there any parallels to So that seems all very complicated and what we have to measure, et cetera, et cetera. But are there any parallels to sugar versus fat? And now spent the last 35 years taking fat off our animals, and now we're putting it back on. Are we? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and I'd like to, first answer by saying that since I've been reading on nutrition, I guess 10 years ago, I feel like eggs have been demonized and said they were good about 4 times from what I've seen in the newspaper, right? So it's hard to say, fat and sugars are important or are the demon or not, because there is, I guess, keto diets now are a fad, so people are able to. So I guess what's really important, so in the framework of NLCA research, it's always going to be, and who are we feeding, and how. And so if you're looking, because like I think it's Parkinson, no, it's epilepsy, they have to eat ketogenic, for some reason. So there are these people that can, or celiac, or so it's a question. But then if you're looking at, let's say, a healthy male individual, and there are no reason to say, because some people demonize carbs or fats, but the idea is getting the latest research. So let's say fat, and so fat, if it's and again, I'm not a nutritionist, so that's why there will be nutritionists involved in these projects. But so fat, for example, red meat and processed meat are 2 different feed, but sometimes they are treated the same. Like, so if you have, let's say, a red meat product, I think the idea is less but better. So this is a very good food ingredient. You should have it in your diet, and it's not gonna. So it's to put at the forefront. There's no reason to demonize the fat profile of this ingredient because it's not associated. So making sure we have the latest nutritional data when we're making these claims and when we're putting the framework for the research. I think that would be the way to go about it. So.
Just going to add comment to that. Sorry, I'm Julia Sikula, Head of Nutrition at Beef and Lamb, working with Vincent and Talia in terms of NLCA and some work that we're trying to get over the line. So in terms of the nutrition question that you asked before, it's about looking at, I guess, the key things that we're trying to look at in terms of our product and the markets that we're trying to look at. So yes, salt, fat, everything about nutrition changes every single day. You look at something else, social media says something else. But the key benefits that we have from our product is the protein side of things. We're outside part of the supermarket. Nothing is added to it. It's a good source of iron, zinc, B12. And so what we're trying to show with the NLCA work or work in this space is actually how do we compare and how do we actually have really good messaging that puts our product in a really good, superior place, really, in market compared to, and we're part of how we eat and what we eat. And I think the conversation about sugar, fat, all of that, it's still going up and down. You look at LinkedIn at the moment, everything coming from America is really sort of swaying everything quite considerably. So you've got to look at everything quite objectively. But I think if you think of the key benefits of our product and how that compares when we look at the LCA side of things, I think that's where our strength is. So happy to chat the nutrition side of things. I think I am the only dietitian in the room.
Just pick a couple of questions that's on the Mentimeter.
Yeah.
Is the work going on globally to showcase? I mean, this is obviously part of a bigger.
So there is some groups in the UK which are looking at it, but and I feel like I'm always worried about getting scooped as a researcher, but I feel like they're missing the point of looking at the use phase. All the cooking energy that's used, especially in lower middle income countries or countries with carbon intensive grid. I think that's where the gold mine is. So there is some work on it, but it's still cradled to Storgate, and they're still comparing apples to oranges in my view. But it is rapidly expanding science. They're trying to figure out what's the best index, best nutrient metrics to look at it, but it's still no clear white and black for beef, right? It's always beef still comes out not as a top one, and I don't think it will ever be the most sustainable, but we can definitely change the level. Like instead of being tenfold, it's just 10% or 20% more than peas. What is the current role of retail on this topic? Good question. I would say not enough, right? Because as I said, like there's no cradle to fork comparing, let's say, a new fake meat product and a red meat product on the same framework. And yes, we should be looking at it more holistically, right? So this is a 15-minute presentation, right? But yeah, the idea is looking at as a meal component, right? And taking all your protein source is beef, and you like peas. Well, and it's interestingly going to be a very interesting metric to look at these hybrid products. So meat and fermentation. So yeah, we will be looking at it from a holistical perspective, from a meat, but in the idea of being, what's the sustainable place of meat in a meal, and can you eat meat without feeling guilty? Also, that kind of end message to consumers.
I think we'll.
Yeah.
Somebody was too late with the question.
But
Yeah,
I mean,
for
that's
sure.
gonna happy to come see me. I won't say. I won't. It can be a secret. Okay, thanks.
No, thanks, Ed. And he's around all day. Hit him up on.
I shouldn't be carrying the mobile. I'll start walking across the stage singing, and nobody wants that. So we're gonna have online, and I saw Brian was online because he was messaging that we were late. Trisha Johnston is going to talk to us about breeding sheep with lower carbon footprint. So Trisha is a senior scientist and team leader at the Ag Research Genomics team down in Invermay. And her research is around development novel traits of important for breeding programs in the New Zealand sheep industry. And she's been working with Suzanne Rowe and John McEwen in looking at the breeding sheep with lower carbon footprint. So she'll tell us all about it. And the benefit of having her on the screen like that, if you can cut her off if she goes over. Welcome, Trish.
Right, we're ready for you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear
Now
me
we
now?
can hear you.
Yay! So am I good to go? Perfect. Thank you, everyone, and sorry I am not there in person with you yet. Christchurch fog meant flights were cancelled this morning, so Brian and I will be joining you online from the MPI office, and I will be joining. So this is a presentation on behalf of my colleagues, Suzanne Rowe and John McEwen. A lot of the credit for the work in this presentation does go to them for their efforts over the years, but I have had a role in aspects of this, and particularly as we're looking to industry uptake of breeding sheep with a lower carbon footprint. So having not been there, I'm not sure how much you've heard about methane to this point with some of the other presentations maybe in this session. But just as a bit of a background, we are talking about methane in this particular presentation. And methane is a byproduct of what happens in the rumen. So animals will ingest grass, but what happens in the rumen is that it is filled with millions and millions of different microbes that have the ability to break down that really complex plant material through fermentation processes to produce acetate, propionate, and butyrate. But what happens as a result of that process is that there is this excess hydrogen formed And the rumen also has, as part of its community, these methanogens, which take CO2 and take that excess hydrogen and convert it into enteric methane. So the reason that we're having this conversation is that 80% of New Zealand's agricultural emissions come from enteric methane, and this equates to about 35% of New Zealand's total greenhouse gas footprint. Throughout these slides, you're going to see no mention of things like GWP star or anything. I'm not a climate scientist. I'm a geneticist with an interest in production traits and how we can integrate methane alongside those production traits. So we can find somebody else when I'm up if you'd like to have some conversations along that line. But the rest of this presentation is going to be thinking about the different types of mitigation technologies for livestock, with a particular emphasis on the role that genetics can play and us trying to meet some of the targets that we have as an industry. And so the majority of this presentation is going to be about the sheep journey that ag research has been on, initially very much in a research setting, but increasingly involving the likes of NZAGRC, PGGRC, Beef and Lamb New Zealand Genetics, and increasingly industry breeders. So this started back, we started back the concept, and this is really credit to my colleague John McEwen, of starting what we refer to as our greenhouse gas selection lines that were established down at our ag research woodlands property near Invercargill. But the screening that actually took place to decide on how many animals and which animals would go into these selection lines took place by screening a whole lot of animals, about 1,000 from the likes of our New Zealand Central Progeny Test through the respiration chambers in Palmerston North, and trying to identify animals that were exhibiting high and low methane yield, whereby we talk about methane yield as being the amount of methane produced per unit of feed intake. So we established the selection lines back in around 2010, and you can see here that in 2010 we started them, and what we have been able to achieve in those first few years, it was just kind of getting things underway. We'd established some differences, and so we had a high and a low methane right from the get-go, but in terms of actually getting that divergence, it took a few years of that breeding to start taking place. But this kind of graph goes through to 2018, but it has kind of continued on that trajectory. And we now have at least a 12% difference at a flock level between the high and the low methane lines, and at the individual animal, up to 30% difference between the highest and lowest emitters within that. So we have been able to really successfully show that we have been able to divergently select for this trait. But one of the questions that we've had right from day dot is that we don't want to be encouraging the uptake of this particular trait within our industry if it has any impact or antagonisms on important production traits. And so right the way through, we have been measuring every single trait, or nearly every single trait that we can think of to go alongside that data set, alongside those animals. And so it's traits that are recorded in Beef and Lamb New Zealand Genetics relating to growth, fertility, DAG score, internal parasites, lean meat rates. And so what this graph is just kind of demonstrating is where we've kind of landed with the selection lines, looking at the variation that we see. So up here with the methane yield and methane traits, we definitely have that divergence in terms of the methane that is being produced. But as we go through, we do see some differences. The highest ones I've kind of highlighted here. The parasite is better, lower parasite burden actually is favourable within animals. We do see a difference in ewe weight as well, that these animals do tend to be a little bit smaller. But when we kind of package it all up together and look at profit in terms of our selection indexes that we have, we can actually see that the low methane animals come through as being more profitable or having a higher index value than the high greenhouse gas selection line animals. There is a little bit of a a difference in meat traits, in that we do see them tend to be a little bit leaner, those low methane animals, a little bit less carcass fat, and they are also producing more wool. Because I have a little bit of a bent in the meat science area, one of the key things I was really interested in doing was, because what we tend to be observing with these animals is, I think in the first slide I talked about acetate, propionate and butyrate as being the outputs of the rumen in terms of the volatile fatty acids that come out. What actually controls their development or derivation in the rumen is particular rumen microbiome that is also associated with the biohydrogenation pathway, which takes what we have as our starting fatty acids of linoleic and alpha linoleic acid and takes them through to, in what is really for us the worst case scenario of full saturation, through to stearic acid. But there's a different sets of populations of bugs within the rumen that mean that sometimes that process is not complete, and that's where we get those kind of intermediate trees, sometimes remaining of linoleic and alpha linoleic, but other times some of those intermediate trees. And so what we were really curious to understand was whether or not these selection lines differed in their intramuscular fatty acid composition. And so a piece of work that I did quite a few years ago now looked at those differences, and we were really pleasantly surprised to actually see that we had a lot of differences, but in a really favourable direction towards those low methane animals, where they ultimately are producing more polyunsaturated fats in their meat, and it's kind of coming through with more of our linoleic and alpha linoleic acid, but some really interesting ones around some of the branch chain fatty acids around C14 and C15. Based on this, but also some literature that was coming out from overseas, we were really interested in whether or not this also translated into the milk that the ewes were producing. If we could demonstrate that, then that had real benefits for being able to translate across to the dairy industry. And so over a number of years, we've also collected milk samples from those selection lines and have seen similar differences in the fatty acid composition. Not every single one of them is exactly the same, but some of those key differences kind of levels of polyunsaturated fat have come through in those low methane animals. It was all well and good for us to be able to do the greenhouse gas selection lines, but that is kind of artificial in terms of what actually happens in industry. You don't do single trait selection. We have to work within a balanced index. And so we had the benefit of a flock that we have that is down again at our Woodlands research farm, what we refer to as flock 2638. Used to be a heavily Coopworth influence to that flock, but now has industry linked sires to the likes of Pamu, with Romneys coming in as well. It is a flock where we have full genomic information on it, and they are doing a selection that's based on New Zealand maternal worth, meat, fecal egg count or parasites, DAGs, and over the last few years have integrated methane as a trait within that. And so in 2017, methane was added as a trait at an equivalence of $100 per tonne of CO2 equivalents. And what we can see in the graph on the left here, this is our methane trait. So kind of prior to any direct selection going on, it was fairly neutral relative to industry average, kind of going up a little bit, going down a little bit. But from when we very specifically added it as a trait into the index, we have been able to see a 4% drop in that value. But what is really encouraging is on the right is the genetic trend for all of the other things. So I'm in New Zealand maternal worth index with WormFec added to it, which is our parasite one. And we can see that we've continued to make genetic improvements across the board in those traits since that time, with that trend kind of still sloping upwards and not really flatlining. So what that's been able to tell us is that we've been able to simultaneously select for reduced methane without impacting on our overall maternal worth. Some of the summary numbers that go with it, looking at the industry average flocks and where we've kind of tracked since 2017 when we added it. And where we kind of anticipate that we could go is that we really feel that if we are able to continue on the trajectory that we're on, that we will be aspirationally, but realistically, able to achieve somewhere in the order of a 20+% reduction in methane, whilst maintaining that overall improvement in our New Zealand maternal worth. So really proving that we are not compromising on anything within our other maternal traits through adding that as a trait. So with all of this kind of information in behind us, we had a lot of confidence to be able to actually take this out to industry. And this became a partnership with Beef and Lamb New Zealand through support from and co-funding from the Ministry of Primary Industries to brand and develop this concept of Cool Sheep. So Cool Sheep is our measuring of sheep for methane in the industry, and it really relies, there's a photo here on the right of our pack trailer, and there's a little video coming up about it. But effectively what it enables us to do is to be able to take the trailer on the road and go up driveways of breeders throughout New Zealand, as far north as Kerikeri, for one of the Pāmu flocks, right down to the depths of the South Island. What we tend or target measurement of is about 12 progeny per sire and targeting about 168 progeny per farm. Through the Cool Sheep program, we're measuring about 5,000 rams, they tend to be rams, throughout New Zealand per year. They're mainly maternal breeds at the moment, but as you will see in the upcoming video, some terminal sires have also been through from time to time. Within the Beef and Lamb Cool Sheep website, there's a whole kind of resource kit for breeders to and commercial farmers to think about how they can use this information within their breeding programs or their commercial farms. And we're really trying to set it up to be able to work ultimately with the inventories that are being developed. And a lot of work is going into that to make sure that this information can count towards inventory, towards lower methane. So hopefully we can just have a quick little video here. So this is the pack trailer, and this is Barry and Ian and some Suffolks that were up near Middlemarch going through. So the animals are in the chambers for about no more than 50 minutes. The yellow machine there is the Eagle 2 that measures methane, oxygen and CO2 levels. We'll kind of get baseline at time point 0, which is our baseline, and then at about 25 and 50 minutes we take additional measures whereby we see those methane levels increasing over time. Sorry. But so as I kind of indicated, we've got somewhere probably in the order of about 5,000 animals a year being measured. They're made up of about 20 to 30 different breeders. Some are measuring more than the 168. But what we have is a number of breeders who, kind of like Flock 2638, have actually started selecting their animals based on lower methane breeding values. And this particular breeder, who is up in the Waikato, and so you can see here has traits, the DPF that you can see there on the right is the facial eczema index, which is really important to them. They started their journey in about 2021 down here, and they had actually been trending down a little bit. Whether this was around ewe size, we're not completely sure, but something was driving a little bit of a reduction based on our predicted levels of methane using other traits like live weight. But from 2021, when they made a really active selection decision to start placing selection pressure on methane, they have been able to achieve about an incremental gain or drop here, whilst again, like we saw in 2638, not compromising at all that New Zealand maternal worth index, so that is continuing to improve year on year for them. And additionally, is really important for this particular breeder, that kind of disease index as well around his facial eczema and X's facial eczema and their parasites. And so what this particular breeder really proudly shows is that he has been able to place selection pressure on breeding for low methane alongside his other production traits, without compromising those other production traits. So it's really awesome to be able to see this kind of research and action really now starting to occur on commercial or on breeders' properties, and we will now have commercial farmers who are buying these rams, and so we're starting that journey of dissemination of low methane genetics throughout the industry. To the future, putting animals in the portable accumulation chambers, well, a really effective way of getting a methane measurement is quite time consuming and costly to be carting that around, and that we can only do about 168 animals a day. So Suzanne is leading an extensive research program. What we're targeting is kind of proxies, where we're looking to other ways to be able to predict methane on larger numbers of animals. We have the ability to use DNA and genomic selection. Right the way through the presentation, I've been talking about the microbes in that rumen and how they're kind of driving what actually happens. And so we have some quite sophisticated ways of capturing and sequencing some of that rumen microbiome, which we can then demonstrate actually is predictive of traits like methane, as well as traits like feed efficiency. And so we're continuing to develop and evolve that. We've actually got an active program with Pāmu at the moment where we rumen sampled a whole bunch of animals last week, and by next week we will have sequenced them and produced rumen or methane breeding values for those animals based on those as part of a beta test. The other area, and it was kind of the slide I talked about earlier, this fact that we can see quite differences in the fatty acid composition. This is another promising proxy, particularly for the dairy industry, because it actually extends further than doing gold standard wet chemistry to doing kind of MER predictions where you're actually just doing spectral imaging. The table here on the bottom right is kind of demonstrating. So what we have on the bottom part of this diagonal is the genetic correlation, and so the higher that value, the closer it is to that being able to predict that particular trait. And so we can actually see that some of these traits have quite a high genetic correlation with our methane measure or our PAC. The standard errors are a little bit high at the moment, and so we're really trying to get more data into this to be able to predict. We are also starting the cattle journey, so we've obviously been able to take our sheep journey a long way through to kind of commercial implementation, but we are needing to get the dairy and beef on board, and they absolutely are. So alongside our sheep PAC measurements, we also have cattle PAC as well. Over here on the right at the top is an example of the cattle PAC, and so they're following a very similar path and starting with PAC, but also exploring those proxies around DNA, the rumen microbiome, and milk profiles, particularly in the dairy industry, to be able to predict methane levels. So as a summary, breeding for low methane per unit of feed eaten works. We've been able to demonstrate that with our selection lines. We have a moderate heritability for the trait, but we've also been able to demonstrate through the likes of the Flock 2638 and also the likes of that industry breeder that it doesn't have to lower profitability. We can kind of achieve genetic improvement across our maternal index traits as well as lowering methane at the same time. And that although it's slow, it is slow and cumulative, and so will ultimately make a meaningful contribution to reducing our emissions. We're now looking to expand into cattle and really wanting to develop up that proxy side of the program so that we can have more animals coming through with methane predictors. We're also very interested in the interaction with other mitigations as they start to come on stream. What happens if we use one of the vaccines or inhibitors once they start to become available on these animals? So it's a resource that is sitting there to be able to explore these with that low and high selection line animals as we move forward into the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia. We're running a little bit short, but maybe one question and then we can.
Do we want to maybe, Brian's just got to get to the airport in a little while. I'm going to be joining you guys hopefully later on tonight, and I'll definitely be there tomorrow morning. So if anybody does have some questions, if they'd like to come and find me, and we can cover them off then, if that's okay.
You might regret saying that, but let's do that. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Cool.
Right.
He's just I put them in continuous, so he's good to go.
We can see him in the background. So in keeping with.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. Cool. Hi. So I'll just dive into it. As Trisha said, I've got to catch a plane soon.
If you hold on a second, I'll introduce you.
Oh.
So this is Brian, everybody. I don't know why I give him money, frankly. So Brian is a scientist.
Sorry, am I going now? Or you're introing me still?
He's a scientist down at Ag Research, also at MMA. He's going to talk about impact of deer in hill and high country system, and he's really keen to go, so I'll let him.
I'm good to go. Okay, thanks, guys. So just I didn't hear the intro, so I'm just going to be covering off some work that we've looked at stream health and water quality in hill and high country farms, deer farms, just some stuff we've done in this space. So to provide a bit of context, when we started this research back in 2017, we were in a situation where stream fencing rules were coming into place for flatland farms, but we didn't really have an understanding of how that was going to play out for hill and high country farmers. And we had a very limited knowledge on the actual impact that farmers were having on water quality in these environments. So we set up this research to initially collect data on water quality and stream health, but also to help us understand what our current impact was, both the negative and the positive impact, to hopefully help us inform any debate or discussion with regional councils and central government around what to do with water quality in the hill and country environment, but also additionally to hopefully identify any issues or next steps for further research or areas that we need to investigate. It wasn't a mitigation research project. We did not test any mitigations in water quality. We were simply just collecting data. So how do we do it? We identified 10 representative deer farms across New Zealand. So there was 3 in the North Island, 7 in the South Island. And once we selected these farms, we selected a catchment on these farms, and we got the farmers to collect monthly water samples from the bottom of these catchments and send them to the labs. We as a science team went out every 6 months in the spring and the autumn to do catchment surveys. During these catchment surveys, we collected a whole lot of information around spatial stuff. So we mapped everything with using a GPS, anything that was contributing water to the water flow on the day we mapped. We also graded these features using a visual grading system that we had developed. And we did a whole range of stream health assessments and collected a whole lot of other water samples from throughout the catchment to sort of track how nutrients flowed through these catchments. So this is just some pictures to give you an indication of the sort of environments that we covered. So we went right from the rolling, lush green hill country stuff of the west coast of the North Island to the real dry high country landscapes in the central Otago area. So quickly for some results, and I won't be covering all the results because there's a huge amount of data that we've collected over the 5 years from each farm. But firstly, the spatial data, this is the sort of maps that we were generating using the GPS and the grading system. So you could very quickly identify potential hotspots in the landscape that were contributing or potentially contributing the highest parts of the highest contaminants to the waterways. We could also get an understanding or feel for how these waterways changed over time and the wetlands and the stream lengths. And you can see that very easily in these graphs here. Stream lengths were relatively consistent on this farm. This is just one farm over the 5-year period. So you can see the streams are relatively consistent around 25 to 35 kilometers.
That's what he gets for using MPI network, I reckon.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, how do I do that? Can you still hear me and see the screen? Oh, okay. Sorry, so I don't know what you missed there, but essentially this graph just says that these systems are very dynamic in nature, and they change from season to season. We did a whole lot of measurement around water quality, like I said earlier. So we measured E. coli. E. coli is measured in water quality using a traffic light system, and it really indicates the risk to human health. These farms were a real mixed bag. It's important to note that the catchments we were measuring were very small catchments and traditionally wouldn't be monitored using this traffic light system. So this is potentially why these are elevated. But one farm or two farms are potentially pretty good. Some other farms weren't so flash when it comes to E. coli. But once again, they are very small catchments. Nitrogen, it's really important when you're measuring nitrogen that you measure the 3 different components of nitrogen because they have all different sources and they may mean different things for mitigation purposes. Dissolved organic nitrogen is a not naturally occurring nitrogen source and can be elevated in some of these catchments. As you can see, these 3 farms I've got in these graphs, nitrogen wasn't an issue on these 3 farms. And these 4 farms, dissolved organic nitrogen, which is a naturally occurring nitrogen, was an issue, and that's why the elevated total nitrogens are there because of the dissolved organic nitrogen component. But then on these 3 farms, definitely the nitrate, nitrite, nitrogen, the triple N was an issue, and that is predominantly from agricultural purposes. It is important to note that some of these farms had high triple N coming onto them, and it had reduced by the time it left the farm. So they were having a positive impact, but it was still elevated when it left the property. Don't have time to go over the phosphorus, but once again, phosphorus results were pretty good on most farms and then elevated on a couple other farms, and that's to do with the dry land environments that they were in and the fragile soils that they're in. Phosphorus is transported into water through soil, and that's why they were elevated. These graphs here, this is all around invertebrate assessments. We did a whole lot of invertebrate assessments. This one's quantitative macroinvertebrate community index, which is essentially just looking at the little insects in the bottom of the stream and what they look like. The first 3 catchment surveys up until the end of 2020 were very healthy, the very healthy stream, but something happened in this local environment between 2020 and 2021, which caused it to crash. Importantly, they recovered, and by the end of the 5-year monitoring period, we were back up to the same levels we were previously. Upon further investigation, this was not a farm-related incident. This was more of a regional scale, and there's some theories on what happened there, but we haven't actually been able to nail that down. We did a whole lot of eDNA testing, which is a really good tool for measuring biodiversity in the environment and in waterways. These results really indicated that these ecosystems, these hill and high country ecosystems that we're monitoring, even under the pastoral landscape, had high biodiversity. And in fact, one of the farms had higher biodiversity on the farm than coming out of the natural forest, the native forest. So they can be very productive landscapes for biodiversity. In conclusion, these systems are extremely dynamic in nature. That's why long-term monitoring is really important. You can't just pick one year monitor and think you know the answer, because they do change from season to season and year to year. And this has implications for mitigations, particularly when it comes to fencing requirements. Deer are very similar to other livestock. They'll have their good things and their bad things. They can be bad on sediment with pacing, but that might be just a management issue with feeding, so you can reduce pacing by feeding them well. Drivers to deteriorating water quality, there's a few of them. Obviously, farming intensity or stocking rate is a big driver. The higher the intensity or the more stock you have, of course, you're going to have an impact on water quality because there's only so much that the land can absorb and before it starts leaching at the bottom or entering waterways. Soil type and climatic conditions, I did touch on it with the phosphorus stuff. They are really important for phosphorus contamination. In dry land environments, there's just not as much vegetation holding that soil together. So when it does rain, that soil flows freely into the waterways. Farm management obviously has a big part to play in water quality as well. And as with many things on farm, compromise is important. This native gully here with these trees is really great for animal welfare. The animals can get in there and shelter and from the rain or from the sun, and it provides them a safe place to hide. But it's really bad for environmental because they congregate in there and all that sediment goes into that bush and goes down into those waterways and causes a big issue. So we really got to have a compromise between animal welfare and environmental concerns on farm. Some take-home messages for farmers initially is that most catchments contain sensitive invertebrate species, indicating that it's not actually too late to change if they need to change. So then they do respond really rapidly. Matching the tools and monitoring tools, there's a whole lot of environmental monitoring tools that can be used out there, from water quality right through the eDNA. It's really important that they match or you match that tool to your objective or your challenge on your farm. And like I said, stream health can change rapidly, both up and down. Monitor your water for your knowledge, not for compliance reasons. And a good way of doing this is the individual farm plans are a really good option because they allow farm-specific mitigations, and they can be applied to your farm rather than blanket policy, which is applied to all farms and possibly don't even need it. So what we tell farmers is you're best to know your impact so you can make a change for yourself in the positive. Some messages for people in the marketing space. A lot of the meat camps, you guys will have your own auditing processes. We're